So what I want to do is just very briefly talk about in a little bit more depth what our options are for debate this year, and and show you what the resources are to get you started, both for coaching your students and for hosting a tournament, which I hope many of you will consider doing. And then I'd really like to have some discussion, even though we only have about 20 minutes or so left to go here. So basically, we've got three options for debate at tournaments this year. And I mentioned this in the previous general meeting, that the method that we've introduced into the middle schools over the last several years has been this special middle school debate format. This will run as a synchronous event, meaning that you need to have virtually, is what I'm assuming at this point, you need to have the judges and the competitors in the same room at the same time. I'll go through the details of the format in a few moments. But basically, the idea of it is to have relatively short speeches so that it's well suited to the attention span, essentially, and the speaking abilities of middle schoolers who are just getting started with debate. And what I would suggest is that for most tournaments that we run, I would suggest that we use this synchronous format and these 26-minute rounds. And reasons for this is it facilitates doubling, meaning that students really could participate in a debate round and then do an oratory or a prose piece quite easily within an hour time frame. And you could use you could have two rounds of debate. What's meant by flighting is that you would have debate A followed by debate B, all within the same amount of time as what you would have for a single round of speech. So that's my recommendation, is that we continue to use these rounds. For some tournaments, and mine is actually on this list, you will need to use the big questions debate format. It will need to be synchronous. That's a 47-minute round. That makes doubling challenging, at least, unless you structure the tournament in a way that you can still do both. But the issue here is that if you are funded by an NSDA grant, you need to use their format and their resolution. I already applied for a grant and I was already accepted. And so I would encourage you, think about applying for a grant. It takes about 3 minutes actually to fill out the online application form, and be generous in your estimate of how many students will compete, because you can always bring down the number of students later, but you can't increase it. So say 50 students are going to compete when you do your application. That's my suggestion. A third option is what's called the Pro-Con Challenge. This was run by NSDA Nationals for middle school this last year. Jackson Creek actually got one of our students into the top 10 in the country in the Pro-Con event. They didn't rank them top 10, but made it into the top 10 showcase. And this is basically the student debates themselves. And so they would give the affirmative, then they give the negative. There's no actual debate. It just shows that you can think about both sides of the resolution, and you would basically run that in the same way that you would in an oratory or a prose event. And you could have 6 kids in the same round, and it could all be done asynchronously. It's cheaper, it's easier, it's not real debate. Kids aren't going to like it as well. They're not going to learn as much from it. But if your choice is yes debate or no debate, I'd say at least do the Pro-Con Challenge. It's better than nothing, in my opinion.
Well, it seems like that would be a good way to introduce it to students who are just completely afraid to do it. So I have a hard time recruiting a team for debate, but I'm really interested in that format for ones who want to break the ice a little bit.
Yeah, and so I think that that's definitely a viable possibility. So I hear what you're saying, and I'd be happy to work with your kids, by the way, and try and kind of like we could have some like collective coaching for like all the kids in the state. Since we can now do that via Zoom, we could have like coaching for debate, like for the whole state, and I can bring in high school debaters to run some of that for you. But I hear what you're saying. Pro-Con Challenge can actually be a very accessible way to get into this. I would suggest, and this gets to the next slide, that we use the same resolution regardless of which format is being hosted. And that way, maybe a student would say South Bend decides to offer Pro-Con Challenge and decides to offer the mathematics resolution. Kids could practice doing mathematics at that competition. Then say Jeannie and Cathedral decided to run the middle school format in January. They could get their feet a little bit wetter by doing the short format of debate. And then by the time it comes to the Bloomington tournament in January, they're more ready to do a longer round of a big questions format debate. So that kind of moving across formats, but with the same resolution, I think could work quite well for us. So as we discussed in the previous meeting, hosts, you certainly have the freedom to select every resolution. My request would just be to let the kids know early so that they know what to be researching and they're not researching for one and confused about what their options are. And also really consider what topic you pick and make sure that it is a debatable resolution that's relatively even on the affirmative and on the negative, and consider providing some resources for the students as well. So here I'm going to just quickly show you some of the resources that are available. If you have a membership in NSDA, you can get to the NSDA website, and I'm going to pull that up for you. And they have a number of resources for big questions. And here, hopefully this is still flashing on the screen. You may need to interrupt vocally if it's not to tell me this. But you can see here there's a big questions ballot, primer, sample affirmative, sample negative. They may yet provide an evidence packet. They've been late with that in the past. And then you can watch a video of last year's final round of big questions debate. So that provides one resource. And then this other resource that I want to introduce you all to is debatetrade.com. And this is a place where you can collect your own like little Google Doc of research and then trade it with students from other parts of the country or even beyond that with others. And I'm actually going to play a 2-minute video introduction of Debate Trade because I think it's new to most people in our state. Let the beat drop. All right, so I am now going to hopefully get back to, now I can see the meeting. So I'm done sharing the screen. Let's talk about all of this stuff. So at this point, I actually want to turn to questions, conversation, confusion. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Well, let me pause and do that. And then I do actually have some more resources to share with you. So are there questions, comments?
I mean, I love the whole idea of debate trade. I think it kind of looks like selling real estate, which for some reason I kind of like. But yeah, I think that's a really good topic because what our students struggled with was really kind of understanding where to go to find the information. So I think to have a space where they can do that with other competitors, I think that's going to be a really good resource.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, and I would encourage them, don't be protective about feeling like I might share it and what if someone else in Indiana gets it. I really think that our best strategy for middle school is to have a highly collaborative sort of ethos where we're not worrying about who might see our stuff. And with, especially if you're using the big questions resolution, there could be people from all over the country who are doing it. You can be anonymous. There's all of those. There's security features that are on the site. But I think if we pair that sort of shared research ethos with even a shared coaching ethos, we could really kind of get over some of that barrier of where do we start that Christine was expressing.
Candy, how long have your kids used this?
For like a couple of years.
Wow, it's a neat platform.
Yeah, well, I think it's got real potential, and I think especially for middle schoolers, just kind of getting people started. Oh, and it's available for extemp as well, and without all the fees. I mean, this is where once you start getting into the world of high school debate, anytime you're buying research briefs or you're getting like extemp Genie or prepped or something, the costs end up being prohibitive. So to have free online resources can be a really helpful thing. Let me just, so we don't lose this, let me just show you some additional resources really quickly here. These are all handouts that are on the, that are attached to this presentation. And I'm trying to tell it to share. It doesn't seem to want to let it share. Okay, now I am sharing. So all of this is posted. But this is a PDF handout that gives you what the basic format is of middle school debate, gives you the times for the constructives and the questions. There's a brief paragraph description of what you're supposed to do in each of the speeches. Then I have links to both the NSDA resources and the debate trade resources. And then here, and this for Christine maybe, and others for whom this is new, I have a worksheet that you can use to write your constructives. And so it's kind of just like fill in the blanks. And I've heard students basically just reading this in rounds, and it works pretty well, honestly. So contention one is like, what's your first claim? It's your first topic sentence, right? So the affirmative will win this debate by showing that's your thesis for your paragraph. Then topic sentence, what's the quotation, the example? So think about this in a lot of ways like a 5-paragraph essay. Just fill in the worksheet. And then the next set is, here are kind of flow sheets, and this is actually great for novice judges as well as novice speakers, where so you just follow the like what speech you're listening to, that's where you take notes for that speech. So if the affirmative constructive, you go down the column. So you would say mathematics was discovered, contention 1. So you put like a 1, here's reason 1, 2, reason 2, and then you draw an arrow into the next line when the negative gets up, and whatever the response was to reason number 1, you draw the arrow and you put that in the negative rebuttal column, and then you do that all across the page. This is set up so it's 2 pages, and once you've done this a couple of times, it's a very easy way to learn how to do systematic note-taking, or what we call flowing in debate. Here is the ballot, which has the way that you set up speaker points, like we care about their arguments, their evidence, their reasoning, the organization, the delivery professionalism. Were they rude? Were they polite? And that makes it a little bit less subjective by having those categories, give suggestions, criticism, comments. Why is it that one team won over the other in debate? Arguments tend to matter a bit more than presentation. They're both relevant. And then here, this next page gives you instructions for judges and a little bit of a primer on what debate is. Again, this is the version for the judges and gives a little bit of the terminology that they might not be familiar with. And then just for freebies, I threw in some speech judging instructions and a sample critique sheet that I use when we're hosting our tournaments. So all of that is available now for you on the website if you click that link. So
all of that will change though. If are we trying to decide whether the tournaments hosting are going to use pro con or which format you're going to use, or is that dependent on the host? And
that's dependent upon the host. I don't think that's a decision that I want to make for everyone. I have to run big questions because I have a grant to do it. If you do not have a grant, I don't think you should use the big questions format. It's a long debate format. It's the most difficult. It's a bit beyond. It's a stretch for the capabilities of our students. One thing that's good about both the short middle school format and the big questions format, though, is that it can either be one student or two students who are on a team. And that way, if you've got one who's a bit stronger and a bit weaker, that can help encourage the less confident student to start competing.
So whoever's hosting would have to provide a separate type of judging critique sheet?
It would basically be done just like a speech critique sheet, or, I mean, that's something we could work out. If it turns out that someone is going to run a pro-con challenge, I don't know that anyone's decided to do that, then I would be happy to work with them on basically something a cross between the middle school ballot and a normal speech ballot. Other questions, comments?
Yes, I'm just wondering what people think about, because last year I had several instances where I did have one person going against a duo. And I know there seems to be something kind of unique to middle school. So are there any strategies or anything we can say to them to help encourage them, not get discouraged if they got clobbered by two people, or just anything we can do to mitigate that?
So one thing we've started doing is having the novice and the varsity divisions for middle school for debate to try and make it less intimidating. We did that at our tournament this last year. I think that really helped, actually. And this is also where I'd say I would be happy to host like a coaching session open to all middle schoolers throughout the state to try and make it less intimidating to get your feet wet. We also can structure the tournaments to power it, and we do this so that you're not going to keep going up against the best debaters. If you lose, you're going to be put against people who have also lost around, and so that way it's not just like you're getting clobbered every single time.
Well, I'm glad you're doing that, because last year I had a young man who actually tried it, and I thought he was ready, and it ended up he needed a lot more. And that's my situation. I'm trying to wrap myself around how to coach it, and I still haven't grasped it totally yet. So
yeah, and this is where I'd say I'd be happy to have like some kind of virtual session, like introduction to debate. We can do some video files as well. There are other organizations that have videos. Beyond Resolved is actually another group that has some instructional resources that are on it, including videos of how to do debate, watching the final round from nationals. Jeannie?
Yeah. Would you give the full-throated commercial for Beyond Resolved?
Yeah, so there's a couple of inequities. Well, there's several in the debate community. One is the socioeconomics. Another is gender. This isn't as much of an issue for middle school as it becomes in high school, but there's a lot of judging bias. So, for example, women and female identifying debaters are 50% more likely to be evaluated as too aggressive by judges. And if they are evaluated as too aggressive, they have a 90% chance of losing a round against males. 90%. And so Beyond Resolved works to fight against implicit judging biases, raise awareness, and provide resources and provide a support network. And we now have an Indiana chapter, and a number of the high school debaters have become involved in that.
And I have found my high school team, it's not just our debaters who are in on it. They just want to be in a supportive network. What is really exciting about Beyond Resolve, it was started by students for students. So it can be a little wonky and a little wobbly because they're full-time students. But I continue to be impressed when I visit the website. So I would encourage you, we are going to put that again on our resource tab for the middle school. So when you're bored, you can click down and start reading about it. Thanks. Thank you, Candy.
We've got 2 minutes. So any last questions, comments before we all join Dawn?
The coaching session that you're offering, Candy, are you saying for our students that you would do an introductory coach?
I'm offering to coach your students. Or actually, I'm offering to have my daughters coach your students. They're both high
I would like if you set up a meet with a link, and would you do it through Google? I would sign up for students up for that.
Okay. Yeah, so we can figure, I mean, the easiest for us would actually be to do like a Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. is when we do our regular practices. We'll just open those up to anyone rather than just Jackson Creek and Bloomington.
That's great. I would do that.
And if that time doesn't work, we can negotiate other times, but that would be the easiest for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
100 years ago, when I was a novice debater, before all of you were born, I was the only girl in the room. I was in a co-ed high school, and I was the only girl. And I continued to be the only girl debater from the whole South Bend area. I would go to a tournament, and they'd say, "Oh, the girl's here. The girl is here from South Bend." I mean, and there were like 5 debate programs going in the high schools then. But from a family who had older brothers do debate, I knew some vocab, but I have to tell you, just watching practices for you and your students, you begin to understand format, language, vocab. Sometimes you just have to get in the pool to learn what the water is. Sometimes you just have to go to a debate practice. How many times have you said to your kids, after the first meet, everything will make more sense? It's the same with debate. If you've never done it, your kids have never seen it, it's a very generous offer, Candy, and thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we would love to have kids from all over doing this. I think it'd be a lot of fun. It'd be like having a little mini tournament every week. So I'm very serious in that. We should all, though, log off of this meeting and log on to Dawn's or Jeannie's, because now you're competing with Dawn. But we should all join Dawn.